Welcome back to the Broadcast Ops Playbook. This show is for teachers building student-led broadcast and media programs and trying to do it without chaos, burnout, and juggling 10 different tools. I'm your host, Taylor Siebert, and in the last episode, we talked about what happens after students say yes. They commit, they show up, but things still fall apart. The answer, buy-in isn't execution, you still need structure. And the first reaction we get from teachers is, okay, but what structure? Where do I even start? And that's what today is about. We're talking about the single most foundational thing you can put in place to stop the chaos, and that is clear roles. Not job titles on a poster or up on your whiteboard. These are real defined roles that students understand, prepare for, and are accountable for. So let's get into it. All right, we made it to episode 4. I think I said that last time that we made it to episode 3, but we're going to keep doing this thing. We're in a new kind of section of the podcast. The first 3 episodes were about building confidence, getting students in your program and through that door. And now we're going to get into some real systems stuff, which I know you love, Hooj. But before we dig in, I love to hear what you've heard from teachers about the first 3 episodes and maybe even the last episode in 3.
Yeah, a huge systems guy. I love structure. And so this is my wheelhouse. Love it. Yeah, a lot of teachers, I think as we've been talking, one of the important things we've been doing is just naming things that they've been feeling that they haven't been able to name yet. I know I had quite a few conversations with teachers that are like, I listened to the podcast and I didn't know that that was what I was feeling. But then you mentioned it and I thought about it and I was like, oh, that is what I'm dealing with. That is the problem. That is the struggle. And because when you're doing broadcasting, seasons are long. Coaches feel it, players feel it, and now you as a teacher, if you've been long removed from sports, you feel it too because you're following right along. Even if you're not doing all of the away games, there's still a lot of home games, especially in the winter sports season. It just seems to take forever. Um, yeah, lot of agreement on the stuff we've been talking about, and it's been challenging a lot of teachers, which is absolutely the point and the goal of this is, if you want to get better, if you want to improve, it's gonna challenge you. It's gonna take some work. Nothing great was ever built in a day. Even with the advancements of AI and Taylor, what you've been doing, building our app with it, it still isn't taking a day, is it?
Right. No, 100%. Sometimes you're like, man, is this ever going to get done? But, and I think where you're going to is really interesting because, teachers hear you need structure and they think, oh, I need to change everything about my program. I've been doing it all wrong. And that's not necessarily what we're saying here. We want you just to start with one thing. And I think that's what's really great about today's episode and what we're hitting, the veteran teachers who've said, hey, last episode was a 1-2 punch to me on what I need to be doing, to brand new teachers. All of these are applying to the different stages of broadcast programs, and we understand they're all different. You guys are building it. You have different types of students, different programs, different goals, all of those things. But you know, the the one thing that remains is everyone kind of has some chaos, and you do need structure. But let's start with one thing, and that one thing we're going to be talking about is roles. And I think a lot of you are going to find some value. So stay with us because Hoosier is going to be sharing the different steps with you. There's 4 of them that he's going to share with you. They're going to be really, really valuable to your program. So, but before we get into that, let's talk about the real problem and what we've identified as the helpful student. And so maybe you've experienced this. It's game day. You've got 5 students who've showed up ready to help. 2 go straight to camera because that's a fun job if you've got headsets. Maybe it's, hey, everyone wants to announce tonight. Nobody touches Wirecast. The power strips are still in the closet. And you, the teacher, you're running around setting things up all over the gym because you're in charge of the PA system and the music and the stream and the video boards. And students are bugging you saying, "What should I do 4 different times?" These aren't bad students. They're not lazy. They showed up. They want to help. Everyone is helpful, but nobody has an assignment, and you get very specific kind of chaos. And that's where confusion sets in. And most teachers blame themselves because they feel like they're letting the students down. And when you hear, when you say, "Hey, everybody just pitch in, go find something to do," you say, "Hey, camera, everyone wants that. Audio, nobody really wants to volunteer for that. There's all these different things. Graphics prep, you're probably getting confused by me listing all these things out, which is what I'm trying to get across is, there's so many different things you can be doing. And so, Nathan, when you've been inside a lot of these programs, as I describe it, all the different hats that you have to wear, and kids showing up say, "Yeah, tell me what to do," and they don't know where to go. What does that actually look like when a school has willing students, but there are no roles? What's the patterns you've seen and what that looks like on game day?
Yeah, you kind of described it pretty well. It's just students standing around. But I think a lot of it too is a teacher who has willing students will just find themselves giving directions. And while that's fine, it's not always sustainable. And it can actually raise stress levels. And game day is already a stressful environment. And you've heard me talk about checklists before. Like, this is why they're important, because if you can give a student in these roles a checklist that they can go through and know that these are the things I need to complete, they're no longer standing around. And so we kind of talked about it last episode a little bit, but just to reinforce why the roles and how the roles are defined, these are the things that need to be included. And again, your students don't want to just sit around and wait, right? We talked about it. They do want to help. In fact, we did, Taylor, you did a broadcast audit exercise with quite a few schools who have gone through that and filled that out. And as we've been looking over the results, what we found is that almost 70% of what a teacher does could or should be handed off to a student. And it's just a simple exercise. You write down everything that you can think that you do as a teacher on a broadcast day, and then just write down whether you have to do it or whether it could be or should be handed off to a student. And like I said, an average of about 70% of that, of those tasks, probably should be done by students.
Yeah, and we hear a lot of teachers say, "Oh, yeah, I should be more organized," or "I just need to plan better. Maybe I need a better spreadsheet." We have fallen into those traps 100%. And, we're doing this, we're trying to practice what we preach here as well. The issue isn't planning. We can plan all day. The issue is that nobody is has a specific role. I think we get caught up in that on our end too of, we want everyone to get all the different experiences. Well, your product suffers when you're rotating students, even mid game. Now, there's a time and place for that, right? Maybe a freshman game or a JV game where you want to rotate, get different reps. But when you've got the game that matters in the broadcast that hundreds of people are going to watch, lock them into that role and give them something that they own specific. It's going to relieve a lot of stress on you because your students prepared for that role because and Hoosier's going to go through the steps on how we define that. What are those roles? But when there's no name to a task, nobody's going to own it. And when nobody owns it, either nobody does it or guess what? Who ends up doing it? Hopefully you said out loud, you, right? Me, I do it. And that's not what we want. We want to try to build a system for you in your broadcast program. Again, one step at a time. And, why this happens, you know, why do so many programs run this way? It's not because teachers don't know that roles are important. It's because these three things that feel true but aren't. And number one is they already know what to do. Hoosier, you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think sometimes these are almost assumptions, right? Actually, they are assumptions. They're not actually, they're not almost, they are, is that students already know what to do. A lot of times, students, just like teachers, have a lot going on. A student goes through about 7 to 8 different classes on, like, a normal 8-period bell schedule throughout a day, not including if they have a job after school and all of these events, and if they're involved in extracurricular, like, there's a lot going on. I have worked with a lot of students, and I'll tell them something one time, and then we'll talk a week later. I'll be like, "Do you remember that?" And they're like, "Uh, no, didn't write it down. I I heard you in the moment I got it, and then life happened, other stuff happened." And so as as teachers, we need to never assume that your students already know what to do. Now, if this is their second year doing it, yes, to a certain extent, we're going to start having students who become leaders who should know what they are doing. But don't always assume that everyone knows what they're doing, especially as you add in new pieces. And especially as if you're a veteran teacher and you're rebuilding this, as you're developing these new things, don't assume that your students are going to get them right away either. That's part of the assumption as well, is that we're doing something new and it takes people time to adjust to something new.
And knowing a skill like running a camera and being assigned a responsibility, I believe are 2 different things. So you've gotta have the skill, and then you have to know what you're assigned to do with that skill. And so I think that's where there are some assumptions made. We do the same. And when you hit, you're getting ready for a live event, you think you got there an hour ahead of time, that hour flies by because there's lots of other things. So there's what we're describing is doing these things in class with your students. There's a lot of prep work that you can do and training and things like that. That's what we're all about with Strive Education, Broadcast Ops, and the playbook that we're putting out to you. Number two is a teacher, you might say, I want them to be flexible. Many teachers resist defined roles because they want students to learn everything. And I completely understand that. We want well-rounded students. We want them to learn different roles. That's, in education, that's your job is to give them an experience that they can, whatever skills they take and responsibilities that you have them do, you want them to leave, your school and your program better than when they came in. And so I understand that. But what ends up happening is, maybe the product is going to suffer because of that. And again, like I said earlier, having them rotate roles in maybe not as meaningful broadcasts, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean, doing those in freshman or JV or junior high games is the place to be rotating roles to see what students are good at. And you've got to have a goal in mind too. What's our goal in having them rotate and be flexible? And so Y anything to add with that, Hoosier? I
Yeah,
know
I,
you've got
I
some analogies.
I do actually. I thought of a really great one here as I was sitting here. So I was glad that you kept talking a little bit so I could fully flush this out in my head.
That's why we're here.
Um, I think of it like the sports team you're covering, right? Think of your program like the basketball team you're covering. There is a reason that there is a freshman team.
Mm,
There's a reason that there's a JV team. Sometimes you have a freshman B team. If you're a large enough school, you have quite a few teams. You have a junior high team. Like, if you truly want a program, and this isn't going to happen overnight, you have to build it up, but a program that is truly efficient and running the right way starts students as freshmen, lets them explore all of the roles to find out what they like, lets them enhance those roles during JV games when they're a sophomore or junior, and then by junior, senior year, they're locked in, not experts, because to be an expert takes like what, 1,000 hours or something like that. You're not going to get that.
10,000 hours.
10,000? Okay.
That's
Well,
what they say. That's what the
maybe
internet
that's
tells
why, maybe that's why I think I'm an expert on some things and I'm not.
Yeah, you're
I've
1,000 hours, man, that's easy.
been cutting myself short. Um, but by the time they're your junior and senior, they're really trained. They know what's going on. And they've earned the varsity games. They've earned the big games. That's the big thing is when students earn it, they're going to buy in even more. Like if you set your program up right, like the students are going to be like I am the main camera operator for such and such broadcast network. This is my job because I've been putting in hours since I was a freshman in high school and now I'm here.
And we do recognize there's gonna be a lot of teachers, I know what you're thinking, "Well, I don't have the luxury to do that." We understand that, but I hope you understand the principle that we're trying to get across is that, yeah, if you only have 5 students in your broadcast program, yes, you wanna have them rotate early and often, and then get them to settle in to some of those roles because it's gonna be really helpful not only for you to, relieve some stress and chaos on game day, but your fans are gonna appreciate it. You have a student who's announced, every single basketball game. By the end of the season, they're going to be really great. You have a camera person who's done every single game. The product is, which is hard to think about in education, but Rob Goff talks about this all the time. It is a learning experience, but we are putting out a product for our school. And you may charge or not, or whatever your stance is on that. But it is representing your school, and you want that representation to be a great one. And so the prep work you do and the things you do before you hit live really matters. And then number 3, is role confusion hides until it matters. On a Tuesday night JV game, things are pretty calm and you can redirect on the fly. But, that Friday night, the lights are on for a football game, or you're coming to help us with a state tournament, or there's a big tournament you're doing like Jordan Burns does down there. Those, you've better have defined roles, because when things are the stakes are a little bit higher, some real problems could turn up if you don't have your roles defined. Would you agree with that?
100%. And that's why, speaking of practicing what we preach, for our state tournament, we put together training for each role, clearly defined. It's about 25 minutes, I think, is the shortest one student will have to go to. And I think some students just, the complexity of their role and the equipment are up to 35, 40 minutes. And so we're really trying to build structure into that because it's big moments. And an example of a big moment turning out right is our Johnson County Central broadcast crew with Marcus came to the basketball tournament last year and they were covering a couple games. And these guys, Marcus does an incredibly great job with his crew. They're well trained, they're calm under pressure, and it actually worked out really great because they got the one game of the tournament before the championship round that had to have a replay review at the end to see if the buzzer beater shot went in to win it. Um, this was something that it's our responsibility as the broadcast crew to provide the replay. It can only be for a last second shot or whether it was a 2 or 3. But because of the professionalism and the knowledge of Marcus and his crew, they were able to make sure that they had the angle of the replay for the officials and to put out, online, and then social media took off with it. It was Sports Center #1 of the top 10 that night. Like it was on Pat McAfee's show. I mean, it went everywhere. But, Taylor, you and I said this. I don't know if we would have had the same result if it was any other crew. I mean, we have a lot of great crews, but, JCC has worked really hard and shown up to the tournament year after year after year. And they know the feeling, they know the setup, and they crushed it.
Yeah, they had the reps, and a lot of programs do, and, they had the luxury that they had been doing replay as well, so they knew the flow of that, and so that's part of the training that we're providing is to prepare them for that, and if, for our state tournament, if you haven't done replay, that's why we do the training, so you can prepare that, but those reps, just like sports, right? The fundamentals matter, and so then they were ready to execute on that, so there's some good news that, fixing this doesn't require, like I said, hey, let's rework the entire program, overhaul it. You don't need a 20-page manual. to figure this thing out, you need to answer one question for every student on your crew, and we're going to help you with that. And what's your job as that role? And what does good look like or great, depending on the goals of your students? So, Hoosier's going to walk us through that and what to do about it in building a role system. And then we have our first broadcast ops playbook resource that you can download to go with this episode. We'll see. We may add some resources to the first three, but this felt like the right time to release. We've built this, and potentially, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll show you that uh, PDF that you can download and fill this out. So don't you don't need to be scrambling taking notes. We've got it taken care of for you. So go for it, Hoosh.
Well, yeah, and feel free to download it as you're listening to it, as we're going through it too, and walk through it with us. But step number one is going to be to identify your 3 to 5 core roles. Every broadcast, what do you always have? Who are the positions that are always there, right? So I'm going to rattle off quite a few words. If you're new, it's going to sound like Greek. If you're a veteran, you're going to be like, duh, we've got that, right? So your starting lineup for live sports is your camera operator, and you can have any number of positions and numbers of cameras, but camera operator is the blanket term. You're going to have your announcer. Usually you have two. You have a play-by-play and a color commentator. If you're really cool, you have a sideline reporter or two. Uh, you usually have, in a bigger broadcast, an audio technician, but that role usually combines with your announcers. Your announcers are usually the ones that need to know about how their mics are set, what the gym sound is picking up. If you have a crowd mic, is it being mixed well? On our smaller broadcasts, that usually lands on the announcers to double check that. And then you have your director who's running the switcher. They're worried about what the broadcast looks like. Are they showing the viewers at home what people are able to see in the gym? Are they introducing the environment, showing the game? They're cutting to replays. They're doing transitions. They're following the run sheet for the opening of the broadcast. Another role is producer. So we use Wirecast as our final, I guess, composition software that brings our audio, our video, and our graphics all into one. And then that's our encoder that sends it out over the internet. Some people just do it naturally within the TriCaster software or vMix or OBS. All of these, all the names synonymous. That's your producer. They're bringing it together. They know when commercials are supposed to be ran. They know when graphics are supposed to pop up. And they're really managing the broadcast. The producer is like the step out. They're looking at everything. Is our audio coming in cleanly? Video clean? Graphics look clean? Commercial ran smoothly? That's their role.
It's the kind of
Um,
the final check, right? And making sure fans at home, because they're seeing what is going out to fans at home, and so they have context, all that, where the other roles are focused on bringing that all into the broadcast.
yeah, 100%. And those are kind of the broadcast roles, right? If you have another, type of production like podcast or content, you might have the interviewer, the editors, the publisher, who's handling social media, all of those roles, right? So this isn't just for broadcast, but we specifically focus on that. And so the biggest thing is define it and then assign it.
I
I mean, I
I love
can't,
the starting lineup. I
yeah.
We didn't talk about that in our pre-show meeting, but man, what a cool way to use our sheet here too, of just like a coach would. You're a starting point guard. He doesn't send 5 guys out, or she doesn't send 5 gals out and say, "Yeah, figure it out. Uh, get whoever you want." Some coaches might. The great ones don't.
You never
And
did that when
so
you were coaching, did you?
yeah, well, there might have been some games, some guys, we actually we had names for our guys. We didn't use point guard, shooting guard. We did Racker, Dragon, uh, we had our locks, and then our rabbit. So we did it's a cool system. So you could even come up with different names for these roles of producer, whatever works for your group, and make it fun, you know? yeah, hey, do you want to be our, rabbit tonight? And you're the camera guy, right? Like whatever themes, you want to use Pokemon names? I don't know. Like whatever engages your students and makes it fun for them to grab that role. And then you've got you can use our sheet to list out what is everything that Hoosier just mentioned or what's unique to your program. I think that's really important. Okay, step two. This is a good one.
Yeah. No, I love this one actually. Um, it might yes, it's important to define your roles, but this, if you don't have step 2 with step 1, it all falls apart. It's not worth anything, right? So, step 2 is define what good or great looks like for each role. Chances are your students have watched a broadcast before, um, but they've probably watched it as a consumer, not a producer. Uh, because I am now in live productions, have never watched a show since I've done productions as just a consumer anymore.
Sorry.
I know this job has ruined how I consume content for the better. So I shouldn't say ruined, but it has changed how I watch content. Um, but most programs will do something that looks like this. They will tell a student, "Hey, you're running my main camera. Cool. Keep everyone in frame, and that's it." Well, keeping everyone in frame could mean the camera zoomed all the way out, or the camera is as close as it can be while still showing everyone, or maybe they take it to mean just show our 5 guys on our team, guys or guys. Like we need to really define what does keep everyone in frame mean. Now in Nebraska, all the schools are required to have shot clocks, and so we usually like to keep that shot clock and use that as a reference of like, hey, appropriate camera framing. The top of your view is probably going to have the shot clock included. We don't want to cut it out. We want to make sure that as they shoot the ball, we can see the path that it travels. I mean, basketball's and basketball, volleyball, football, because there's the ball that's in action goes above. We want to keep more headroom than foot room
Yep.
on those types of broadcasts. And so even just stating that, like that's a pretty basic definition right there. You can go into a lot more detail. One of my favorite things is I think Marcus at JCC has this, but he has examples like side by side comparisons that say, here's a clip that I don't like the framing. Here's a clip that I do like the framing. This is what we need to go for.
Yeah, I like
Um,
that.
and and so even as much as, especially for the people that are visual, like the camera operators, the graphics, hey, I don't like this style. We haven't talked about it yet, but the Super Bowl happened since in between episodes. NBC's graphics package better than what Fox debuted when they did their basic plain ones. So personal preference on I like this graphic or
Yep.
I don't like this graphic. All of those things you can define for those roles. Crowd audios. I could keep going, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm not going to because
And you do that for each role in your starting lineup. And if this sounds like a lot, it is. And we are here to help you. That's why you can work with us and work with Nathan, and he can help you with this because it's a lot. Like, we'll give you the PDF, but if you want help building it alongside of someone and you can bounce those ideas off, that's part of our coaching program and our broadcast education program that we provide. So yes, I'm selling it because we do have a business that we're trying to run, but we've seen teachers just be so thankful for, man, I couldn't have done this without you guys. And, we're not the heroes. You guys are the hero, but we are the guide. And we said that for years. We want to help you along the way because doing this alone, yeah, it's really, really can be a lot, add more stress. You're like, man, I got to fill out this sheet now. I just wanted to broadcast the game. Well, it takes some work, but it's worth it in the end. So step number 3.
yeah. And just real quick before we go on to step number 3, one of the quotes I heard directly from a teacher was, "I was doing this on my own, and I had all of these ideas and directions to go, and I didn't know where to go. I just needed someone to validate. If that's all I do for you is I help you validate that what the direction you're going is right, done deal. I'm happy. That works for me. That's sometimes you just need that person to say you're on the right track. This podcast, this playbook is part of going down that direction. But if, like Taylor said, if you're listing out roles and you're like, I think this is right, but you're not sure, um, that's where I love to help and really define that.
And join our Future Ready Educators community. That's free, and you can ask questions, as many questions you want. Someone will help answer that. So,
Yeah,
all right, let's close
absolutely.
it out, and then we'll share the resource with you guys.
Yeah. Well, so I'm incredibly efficient at what I do. Taylor mentioned at the beginning of the show that it was going to be 4 steps. It's actually 3
Yeah, I
steps.
know. Thank you. I was gonna correct myself, so thank you.
Yeah, I just figured
3 is better
maybe
than
I didn't
4.
tell you I shortened it. Step 3 is this: assign the rules before the event. We've talked about the importance of preparing during the week and not just waiting until game day. Like assign the rules because then students know what to be working on during the class time. And so this kind of all ties it together. Um, Having the definitions and then assigning the roles to people, make sure that during the week they're preparing their role, they're doing all of their pre-game checklist things that they need to be doing. Again, big on checklists. They know what position they're playing, right? They know what they're doing in the broadcast. They're not just showing up like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to do tonight. Um, I hate that. I don't know about you, but I hate that. And I'm sure you as teachers have, the days that are the most stressful are when you walk into school and you're like, what am I doing today? And because of school structure, hopefully you don't have that. Hopefully you've put together your lesson plans and you know what you're doing. And so that's why it's important to give that to students as well. Make sure that they know. Because showing up minutes before and getting told, hey, by the way, you're announcing, been there, done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately, fortunately,
You've had enough reps to do that. That's not
yeah,
suggested
exactly.
for beginners.
I am
That's good.
I'm experienced enough that I can just hop in and pull something off. I will say it was not my greatest,
Mm,
right? It was by far not, I didn't have any names memorized. I
right.
got most of the pronunciations right. I really just kind of avoided saying names. I said, I'll be your color commentator. I just won't say names. I'll
Yeah.
just
Yeah, that's a
describe
good
what I'm
idea.
seeing. But yeah, it definitely was not my greatest. If I would have had time to prepare and know a little bit more about what I was talking about, I would have felt a lot more comfortable. Fortunately, I was working with someone else who was there the entire tournament that I hopped in on for just the championship games. But yes, I was unprepared. My work suffered because of it. It wasn't a failure because thankfully I've been doing this for 7 years. But your students haven't been, right? Your students haven't had the experience yet. And so help them. And by helping them, you're going to help yourself.
All right. Do you wanna land it with your love for aviation?
Ye Yeah, well, this was not the original
Meta
analogy
analogy.
we talked about. I know. I'm gonna keep being an aviation nerd, and you can't stop me. Um, think about a pilot here for just a little bit. We've talked about pilots and their checklist, the things that they go through during every flight. But one of the things the pilots do is when they first get assigned a flight, they first get told, "All right, here's where you're taking off from. Here's where you're landing. Cool. We've got point A and point B." Then it's up for the pilot. Then it's up to the pilot to determine how are we going to get from point A to point B. All right, we map it out. There's waypoints that pilots use. Anyway, GPS stuff. It's like entering navigation into Google Maps or something like that. Now we know how. Now we know where we're going, how we're going there. How much fuel is it going to take? How many people am I going to have on board? How much cargo? All of these factors, they then have to start doing the math. They don't do that when they sit on the plane. They do it before they even get to the plane.
They
They
know
do
everything.
all this
Yeah.
they do all this math, they do all this prep. You can't just calculate fuel when you get on the plane because fueling a plane takes a while. But among other things, it's just better to be prepared. Then when they get on the plane, pilots are executing. And I think that's the biggest thing. That's why you see students that are just standing around because they don't know what to execute, right? But if you have them prep in class, they have their checklist, they know what they're doing. Now is the time when they get to the event, their brain goes from preparation mode to execute mode. They're no longer planning, they're executing, and they're just going through the checklist. And it might seem a little robotic, but they're accomplishing the tasks. And then when it's all done, everything's checked, we're good to take off for the broadcast. And that is my plane analogy, my pilot analogy. More to come. This is not your last pilot and plane
Watch
analogy.
out. Watch
I
out.
know.
Hoosiers flying planes.
Only
Okay, so we
virtually.
wanna I wanna show you what you're gonna be getting, or maybe you've already downloaded it. So if you haven't yet, this is now your preview of how to use this. Is here's your PDF where you can fill out the role, and then exactly what, Hoosier is describing is what are the things you're doing pregame, during the game, and post game. And this is great preparation. You don't have to have this in front of you during the game to go through. This is the classroom activities to go through this with your students. And you can put the which event you're preparing for, what are they doing? And then you can even assign that to a student so they've got that in. You're filling this out. So you've got your starting five, then you put the student's name, who's the backup? That's always nice. And then is this role ready to go? And then we've put a role reference guide because a lot of you maybe don't know or you're trying to take notes on what Nathan was saying each of these roles do. Here is some examples that you guys can reference. I wouldn't necessarily just copy and paste these up into that, but have a conversation with your students around that. So, really excited to share this with you, and I hope you get some great value out of that resource and what students should be doing in each role. And I think it's going to really help you. And so we'd love to hear feedback from that and encourage you guys to take some time to fill that out, especially you maybe depending on when you listen to this, if you're listening to this next week, we're towards the end of basketball. You may not have any spring sports, but a great activity to do now after a season with your students, and they can kind of digest what are all the things that I did in that role. And a great resource if you're trying to recruit students for next year, you have this kind of in your library, if you will. So definitely encourage you to do that. And it could just be, one sentence, a word, whatever that is, but a starting point. So you can find that at strive.education/roles. We'll have it in the show notes as well there. But now the question that comes next is you've got roles, students know what they own, but how do you hold them accountable to it? And that is what we're going to be talking about next. Instead of asking, did you do this? Did you check that? You maybe feel like you babysit your students a lot or micromanage. I know I feel that way sometimes. That's what we're going to be tackling next in episode 5, accountability without babysitting. We will see you then.